You are listening to the Beyond the High Road podcast with Shelby Milford, episode number 98. Stay tuned. Hi. How you guys doing? So today we are going to be before I even go into, I'm going to announce at the end, like the full shebang, the deal, what I'm doing. But I just want to let you know that something's coming soon. We're going to, by popular demand, I've had comments and emails and inquiries as to when we're going to start the membership again, when we're opening the doors back up. And although it won't be, I'm not calling it a membership, it's still, I'll tell you about it in the end. But anyway, something's coming up very soon. If you've been wanting to get more out of, like, you like what you're hearing in the podcast, and you've really been wanting to apply it to your life and make it actually feel like it's working in your life more than it is, then stay tuned for that, because I'm going to give you guys two different options. So I'll tell you more in the end. But I've been working hard on it's been like writing a darn book to get all the material in place for you guys. Okay. Today, we're going to be talking about the ways that you might be unintentionally pushing your kids away from you. Most of these that I'm going to list are classified as cognitive distortions. So we'll go over the top 5. I am going to count down, like, in order. However, this doesn't have to be everybody's order. There's no real rhyme or reason. I guess what I'm trying to say is this is really subjective. But I'm going to label them anecdotally, going from the least to the most common that I see. The most harmful, I don't know, just seems to be like the most problem causing distortions, ways that you might be pushing your children away. Okay. In your brain, or actually, as you guys know, if you've been listening to the podcast, whatever we think is going to create the actual results in our life. So if you're thinking it and you are still in regular contact or irregular contact with your child, if you're going into all the situations that you do speak to them, thinking these ways that I list here, then of course it's going to cause you to show up feeling guarded and less connected to them. So let's get started. So this came up because last night I was like, what do I want to do tomorrow? I'd go through it every week. I have the running list of other ideas, right? And I was like, no, I don't feel like it yet, or this isn't time yet, or I want to do that when I start to interview people, because I will do that eventually coming up in year 3. And so then I told myself it was already 10 o'clock, 10:30, and I wanted to go to bed. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take the most common theme from tomorrow morning's clients, and I'm going to come up with material based on that. And that is exactly what happened. In fact, I got 2 fantastic ideas for episodes. That would be this week's and next week's too. So look forward to that one. That's going to be another interesting one that I think most of us as alienated parents struggle with or have struggled with at some point, for sure. So back to today. Number 5, it's an odd one, but being too positive. If you don't get me already, I think maybe you will once I explain this. And in fact, while I was prepping for today for this episode, I realized just how much I actually did this without even knowing. I didn't think there was such a thing of being too positive. This is not a cognitive distortion, by the way. What is cognitive distortion is discounting the positive, which I will get to in a minute. It's just the opposite of this. But being too positive, I think sometimes we as alienated parents, me as an alienated parent, before the alienation actually even took hold and the strategies were there, I felt so much pressure, and I'm sure you guys can all relate to this, when it came to my parenting. Everything I said or did, every little side eye or time I enforced a rule, I felt for sure there was going to be some pushback from the other side, which is, of course, also another cognitive distortion that I'll go to a little later in the episode. But I felt like I was under a microscope, at all times. And so I didn't think that I had the luxury of being negative. I'm sure you guys can all relate to that. And also, in my mind, I had this idea of what she might be putting up with over at the other house and how much pressure I believed that she might be under, back when she was living with me, I wanted to make my house, our house, a haven for her. I wanted to make it super serene and super grounding for her. That was always what I took pride on. And I believe a lot of you out there also pride yourselves on is, that you are that source of grounding and you always felt that they felt they could release themselves and their emotions when they were at home. Yeah. And I mean, that is amazing. And that is exactly, I believe, the goal. But sometimes when the pressure was on, I felt the need to push that narrative or make sure that she knew that this is where home was, where she could actually express her emotions, where she could actually be her true self, which now looking back, I see a little bit as problematic. I can see some potential problems with trying to push that narrative to her so that she felt secure. I was trying to almost push the security onto her. Whereas I know that I didn't need to do that. It was already there. So it might have pushed some beliefs onto her or maybe even some pressure. But what I was getting to is there was a point there, especially when I was under fire, I felt very pressured to provide a source of happiness and uplifting atmosphere for her and for me to be always happy and always on and ready to go. And hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to do next? I mean, I really wanted to be that way. I wanted to be positive. I really liked being positive. But I also know that back then it was not fully genuine. I was sort of putting that hat on. And now there's nothing wrong with that. However, there are times when I think that it's not appropriate and can cause a disconnect between you and your child if you are still in everyday talks with them. And even if you're not, if you are feeling the need to always be on and overly positive and trying to find the silver linings of the situation, um, trust me, I know this one well. Well, at least yada, 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 which again is a great attitude to take, to always be wanting to take something away from the situation, something that we've learned and we can use it and blah, blah, blah. Also, I think that sometimes we buffer away the feelings associated with grief, the true core pain and sadness and maybe even, anger and some other feelings. So there's that. But I can remember too being on like Zoom calls after I moved down here. And even there during the pandemic and stuff, I can recall a lot of instances where I would get on the Zoom call and I would feel like I needed to be on. And I created this, everything was just fine and just happy, blissful, and rainbows and unicorns, right? But at the same time, here we were on this Zoom call with a supervisor who had a piece of paper up against her monitor so as to not interrupt our situation there. And I don't mean to bring darkness into the situation. I mean, I do believe it's always great to see the bright side and see the benefit out of everything, right? 100%. And also, I don't know how appropriate my blissful attitude was in every conversation. It didn't always call for that. And there were times where you always wish you could go back and see yourself like in action back in the day, just out of curiosity to see what things were like. But, obviously can't do that. All we have is our own perception. But I do believe, I know that there were more than several occasions where my daughter would be expressing her displeasure or uh, unease about a situation that happened with her, whether it was at school or maybe even getting grounded at her dad's house. Disappointments happen, especially in a preteen girl's life, but the boys too. Things happen, shit happens. And in those moments, due to my discomfort with her discomfort, like I didn't know how to help her. And so instead of allowing her to be in her discomfort and be unhappy, I would look for the silver linings of the situation. Oh, but at least blah, blah, blah. At least you learned something. I can picture her right now sort of deflating, in a way, shutting her down and not allowing her to be and have her own emotions. I think this is something that we do, especially because, like I said, not only do we feel for the situation that they're in, some of us may have been alienated in our own situations, and then others of you may not have been, like in your childhood, right? You may not actually know what it's like to feel alienated from a parent. So you can only imagine, right? So you have all of this empathy and helplessness and not knowing how to act and wanting to accommodate and be the best parent, best supportive model of positivity in their lives, be their beacon, oftentimes by being overly positive and not allowing them to experience the disappointment and the upsets that life inevitably hands us, all of us, then we cause this disconnect between us. Okay, so on the other side of that is, which is a cognitive distortion, is discounting the positive. Everything turns into a negative. We don't take into account the positive things that have happened. I think with all of this, you guys, you just have to remember that everything is a balance and you determine that balance. And the way that I decide for all of these is how I feel inside when I'm doing the things that I'm doing or thinking the way that I'm thinking. Do I like the way that I'm feeling right now? Does it benefit me? Because sometimes the way that you're feeling does push you to where you want to go. Never if you're bullying yourself, but like, let's say, for instance, you are feeling angry. And sometimes we can take anger and use it for fueling us into gathering people to come up with solutions for alienation. We can really use anger to our benefit. Productivity doesn't usually come from being in a content and happy place. You know what I'm saying? But you know the difference and you can determine that by the way you're feeling. Like, is this actually going to serve me? Can I use this to serve me? And if I can't, if it's just causing me to feel more distant from my child or create distance between us because the way that I'm showing up and the way that I'm thinking about us, your child and you, that's where you can redirect yourself. So that is number 5. I guess I should also point out here too, the difference between a cognitive bias and a cognitive distortion is that the distortion is like the exaggerated form of whatever thought process that you're following and usually becomes problematic. Where cognitive biases are just they're human tendencies. It's just the way our brain operates, right? But cognitive distortions usually show up in stressful situations after trauma, like where we've come from. Okay. So you do your own research on that because that's just the Shelbyism way of of describing it. You might want to Google it just to make sure. Okay. The next one is emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is you base your reality or all of reality on your internal feelings, your emotions. Like, I just had that funny feeling inside. Something's going to go seriously wrong today. I just know it's going to go wrong today because I have had this feeling all day long and there's no reason for me to be anxious. It must be. Now, I do believe in intuition. That's a whole nother conversation. We could talk about that another day. Email me, or maybe I'll do it in another episode in the name of trying to stay on task and keep this episode to less than an hour today, less than 50 minutes. Let's say your child says something that you feel upset about. They have you feeling some type of way, and you conclude that they must be up to no good. They must be doing this as a power struggle or because they're trying to hurt you. It's a fact. They're only saying that to get a rise out of me. Sometimes we'll say things like, or you may not say it this way, but you're feeling rejected by your kiddos. So you must be an unlovable parent. You must be a bad parent. You must not be worthy to parent, right? Because you feel rejected by them. In your mind, the way that you're feeling determines what is actually reality. Sometimes we can think, I feel like a failure, so why even try? Why even try? Because I know I'm going to fail even more, and continue to fail. Right? A lot of these are sort of overlapping and coexist. Anxiety is a lot of times the culprit. We'll take that anxiety and say, there must be something wrong with my kiddo. There must be something further that I need to know about this situation. Something's wrong. And so we go into that negativity about the situation. All right. Should statements. You guys know this one well. We should and shouldn't ourselves. I have an episode on this on should how we should and should not. I believe I did that earlier in the year. It's also another good one to go back to. But this is so common with, I mean, pretty much any interpersonal relationship, but especially when it comes to our kiddos. It shouldn't be this way. They shouldn't treat me that way. They shouldn't reject me. A parent-child relationship shouldn't look like this. This should not be happening. They shouldn't act that way. I shouldn't be cast aside. You name it. All of the shoulds are basically you're like in a counterfactual alternate reality of this world that isn't. Shoulds will screw you every time. The thing about all of these, and that I probably should have explained, but I feel like I almost want to explain it for every single one of these distortions, is that a lot of these, I keep wanting to use the word pernicious today, and I just Googled it. It actually is the right word. A lot of these are pernicious and quiet, subtle in by nature. And so we know that we shouldn't ourselves, right? We know that we don't get the result that we want from being disingenuous and like being overly positive and trying to create an atmosphere that's like an altered reality. We know that we shouldn't do so many things, yet the reason that we continue to do them, a lot of what I tell you on a weekly basis, the things I share with you already know. These are not new concepts that I'm offering to you. But because our subconscious, like the oldest beliefs, are what run us, a lot of these distortions that cause us to feel so much further away from our kids are so ingrained in us, they go unnoticed, like they fly under the radar. And we're doing them so obviously if we were to stop and look, but we just don't see them because we take our lives and the situations in it as though it were fact. So that is why it is so important. Like you can know all of the things that I talk about in this episode and all the episodes all day long till the cows come home. But until you start putting into practice, sort of deconstructing your beliefs, your thoughts and your beliefs on the everyday and really doing the mental work and upkeep, then you won't see the results in your life that you might if you did. Yeah. That is why I encourage you guys on the everyday, like all the time, to do thought downloads, to brain dump, get the words from your head and outside onto the piece of paper. It's a good process to separate yourself from the thoughts that are going on, and then you're able to become aware of them a little bit easier. Sometimes we can, and I've done this before, where I do a thought download and then I completely disregard everything I write, move on, and go right back into my habits and those old beliefs. I mean, I do it all the time. That's what it is. And so we have to intentionally like want to become aware of this stuff. And there's a method to do that. But anyway, so back to where I was. Should statements. They always fuck us. They will always fuck you right in the butt. They cause you, depending on what we're talking about, but they cause you to feel like you got slighted, that this is not how life should be. Not only is it not how life should be, but everybody else doesn't have it this way. I'm the only one. So then it causes you to feel like the special snowflake again, too. And then it's this backwards feeling of entitlement. There is no help for me out there because my life is completely screwed up and I'm comparing myself to those out there and it's different, right? So should and should statements. And when we're in that should place, we're actually in a place of judgment, whether we're shoulding somebody else or we're doing it to our own selves with our children, like when we're engaging with them, when we're thinking on the inside, they shouldn't be acting this way to me, or they shouldn't be so far away from me, or whatever it is that you've got going on in your mind, then you're actually taking away from time that you could be spending with them and being as things are in the situation and really actually opening up your opportunities to connect. And instead you're in this alternate reality. So it causes a huge gap between, and a lot of times it will come out, you shouldn't behave this way. Maybe you don't say the word shouldn't or should, but it's inferred, right? The message is there. And I'm not victim blaming here. I'm assuming that these reactions are because you're grasping, wanting to hold on tight to the little babies that you love so much. I think it's a natural tendency as parents being conditioned the way that we have to think about our situations. I mean, you can't really prepare yourself for something like this, right? So there's nothing wrong with you that you're having any of these thought processes going on, these habits, these tendencies. But because some of these, like the ones that I'm talking about today, cause you to not feel so good and they are more of distortions, then, it's just something to look at. But anyway, there's nothing wrong with you that you're doing them. Most of these are coming from a place of fear of really losing your kids, of losing touch with them, of losing the bond and the connection that you have. So it makes sense, right? But what's so ironic about it is because that's what you're fearing, that is the thing that you will actually make come true. You can't really control what they do, but the way that you show up is already distanced from them. So then you're already beating them to the punch without even realize, without even intending, you know? Okay, so the next one is micromanaging. This actually isn't a cognitive distortion, but I don't think it is. Maybe it is. But it was just something I was thinking about. I was trying to picture an alienated parent at all the stages, different situations that you might be going through. And I think the micromanaging comes in if the alienation started when your kids were like preteen, maybe a little bit younger than that. The micromanaging is a way to try and keep them close. You don't intend to micromanage, but by checking in on them and making sure and trying to cover all bases, you end up coming off as maybe a bit authoritative in a not well received way. I think the micromanaging also comes from you're in a place of fear and wanting to keep them close. And the more that you know about their situations and the more that you're keeping vigilant on what's going on in their world, the closer that you feel with them. And then also because of what might be going on in the other home and maybe even some pushback from your kiddos at this point, if they're of that age, then you feel like that's what you do have to hold on to, is to hopefully in micromanaging, you're helping them, but you end up just inserting yourself in areas that maybe they could do just fine with and let them, like what's coming to me right now is from Finding Nemo. Let's see how little squirt does. Anyway, so yeah, micromanaging oftentimes comes off as controlling. And you know how that does. Nobody wants to feel controlled, especially if you've got an angry teenager. It's kind of self-explanatory. I don't need to go any further. Labeling. This is the one I wanted to get to. These last two kind of go hand in hand. And these are to me, the most common and can be very damaging. I think cause you to feel the most isolated and away from, disconnected with your children, and have with me. I think this is one that we all do. It's a human behavior. We do it in order to create a sense of safety for ourselves, because when we label and sort of put things in boxes, then we can sort of know where we fit in amongst those things, right? And when we're talking about our children, and especially when we start labeling behaviors, attaching that label to them and their character, this is when we can start to feel so distant. Then we're saying, I'm not like that. They're like this and I'm not, right? They're a liar. I'm not. They're disrespectful. I'm not. You know what I'm saying? If you're pointing it out, then it's the inference that you are not that. And already before you even go further in, you've already separated yourself from them. They must be learning that over at the alienating parents' house. That causes now a double separation, double disconnect. So not only is my kiddo not like me, but now they're more siding with the alienating parent. Now, true or not, we already know that if it's not helping you, if it's not causing you feelings that work for you, then why choose it? If you want to feel closeness, if you want to rediscover your bond, your everlasting bond with your children, then these are the kind of things that you look at. So I know that I did this labeling, and also the number one thing I'm going to talk about in just a minute, so much back when my daughter was itty bitty from the get, right? Especially when the stress had just started coming on, because I wanted to make sense of it all, which makes perfect sense, right? And so when my daughter would come home and be displaying a different behavior or be saying things that I didn't sound normal for a toddler, I wanted to label that behavior as bad. I wanted to label that behavior as not natural, or not, um, not something that she learned from me. She learned this from over there, right? Which, like I was just saying, caused me to feel like I was grasping onto her, even as a little one. So, because for me, I've told you that the alienation strategy started from the time that we split up when she was 15 months old. Now, didn't actually take hold until she was 9, but throughout that entire time, I felt like I was constantly battling and like fighting off a lot of these distortions. So for 9 years straight, there were some pretty obsessive and consistent efforts to I want to say destroy our relationship, to remove me from my daughter's life. So I know a lot of these behaviors really well out of experience. And I know that you guys probably understand that, but sometimes I feel like if I listen back to I always do a proof after I already published, drop the episode. I'll listen back to it, and I have to do edits. And sometimes I think, gosh, I hope I sound a little preachy. And I hope that you guys know and understand that um, I say that way. I say the things that I say, and they sometimes come off that way, not because I'm wanting to preach, but because I've been there and I've done the things that I'm talking about or the things that I'm offering you guys to not do, you know? So I feel so passionate about it that sometimes it does come off kind of preachy, but that's not what's intended at all. Anyway, like I've been here with all of these ones, deeply into these, right? Labeling was huge for me because it made me feel like a sense of safety, sort of like I was describing in that Your Pain Is Not Your Connection episode, that if I could label it like this behavior is not mine, she learned that from her dad's house. She learned that from the stepmom, whatever. It made me feel safe, but it was like a fleeting safety. It actually, like, I thought it made me feel safe. I can't even say that I felt safe. I would say it looking for almost like the alienator does, right? Looking to feel better, but it didn't really, I've kept grasping. And so it was a quick, not fix, but it was, anyway, it was something I did that actually caused a lot more distance and a feeling of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm losing her." Like, they're affecting her, they're infecting her, right? I never said that, but I mean, that's really kind of like the feel to it. It felt like I did label this. I used to call them, they were like a weed, like an infectious weed that came and overtook everything and took my daughter with them and the community, some of the people in the community who have since come right back around to me, but doesn't matter, neither here nor there. But anything that was happening with my daughter, I immediately labeled it, oh, it must be because of them. Which actually, saying this now, I actually think that that's exactly what has been done to us. You know, we want to make sense of it and we think, well, that couldn't have come from me. So it had to come from the other house because we don't know, which leads me right into the next one. And like I said, these kind of go hand in hand, which is making assumptions and jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing, which we do so often. It makes sense because we don't have all the information. In a traditional, conventional sort of family, parents don't they have the luxury, I guess I should say, of being aware of all that's really happening in their lives, except for when they go to school. But at night and the values, the morals, all the things that are being instilled into your kids the most, they're aware of, right? And maybe at one point we were aware of. But then when now there's two houses split, one house is doing the alienating, there's not very much contact between you guys, conversation, productive communication between the parents, there's like a literal disconnect. So we don't know. We don't have to assume, but we feel like, well, I don't know have any other way of knowing. So, I mean, I actually must assume there's nothing else I can do. But really there is. That's actually a lie. You don't have to make the assumptions that you are, because especially if they're not working to your benefit or to the benefit of you and your child's relationship, right? Your connection. So, catastrophizing, I mean, I think it pretty much explains itself when we go into these scenarios about what might happen coming up like in the future. We all do this, right? I've got that worry episode, the anxiety episode, where we're constantly thinking about all the bad things that could happen. I stopped doing this a long time ago. It is very rare that I do this because I created so much pain in my life from doing it. It kept me in that special life on earth, but really living in hell place for me, where I felt so trapped because all I could think about is what might happen as a result of my child being psychologically abused. I was going to all that's going to come out sideways in her relationships with her friends. And what about romantic relationships? And I had her all the way past college and what might be happening with her, whether or not she went to college. I had all of these catastrophizing scenarios in my head that became like truth to me. And that caused the biggest sense of separation and helplessness, sense of separation between me and my child, and this overwhelming sense of helplessness. And so if that's what's going on with you, like currently, then I stick around because we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I was talking with a client this morning who actually, this is the reason that I'm doing this episode is our conversation, what we were talking about today actually inspired this topic. And she was talking about how her daughter has been telling her little fibs. And it was causing her to feel angry, feeling like, why are you wasting my time with these conversations? They don't see each other. They haven't seen each other in some months, but they are in contact on the telephone. And so in her mind, her daughter is lying to her. She doesn't understand why. She thinks it's ridiculous. She was also talking about how the way that she speaks to her and the things that she says are sort of baiting. She's intentionally trying to hurt her. And so she's putting those labels on her, right? As like this is a power play on her part. She is jumping to conclusions by saying, oh, she's trying to hurt me. When we really actually don't know what her daughter's intentions are. I mean, it could be, but I can see that also, client, you know who you are. You know that I come from a place of love with this because we've all done it. I just explained how I did this with my daughter when she was little. And I've done it other times when she was older too, like during the pandemic. Like anytime my daughter was on Zoom with me and she was looking anywhere other than at the screen, I was convinced that uh, the stepmom was in the room with her. And I'd be like, hey, come back here to me. And that fear of my daughter being negatively influenced during our time together, it made me angry and also impatient. Like, come on, I have a half an hour with her once a week. How dare she? I was in judgment, not to my daughter at that point, but to the stepmom, who I don't even know if she was in the room or not. But it caused a lot of friction, a lot of tension in the way that I behaved and acted while I was on the phone with her, because then I felt disrespected the entire time. But I would try to be positive, but because that was still bugging me and that was on the forefront of my mind, that I was being disrespected and the stepmom was trying to affect me through my daughter, that is really what showed up on my face. While the positive, I can imagine it was kind of creepy because I was trying to be positive, yet I had such a tense face on. And my daughter, I know she knew me. She understood what was happening, because she'd actually mentioned it in a later instance. So clearly it was written all over my face, yet I thought I was being so sly, which is also creates so much tension and distance between me and her. It did, because now my daughter is feeling like I'm low-key trying to control her or annoyed with the way that she's being. Who knew if stepmom was in the room or not? Anyway, and I said something to her with this positive twist, like, oh, whoever's in the room. I forget how I said it, but it came off crazy. Anyway, so back to my client. So her daughter was lying to her and she labeled that whole conversation as a waste of time. Why did she just waste my time like that? Because none of that was based in reality. Now she feels completely distant from her daughter because in her mind, her daughter's not being real with her. But the fear behind all of it was that my daughter is becoming her father. My daughter's becoming just like her father. And so then every time she gets on the phone, she's always going to see everything that her daughter does through that lens of she's turning out just like her father. Right? And so she's always going to feel this distance and separation because she's labeling her, making these assumptions that her lies meant that that's what was going to happen with her. It's so absolute. And then client cannot see the forest for the trees because she's too stuck in, yeah, she's lying because she's turning out just like her father. She's only got her father's influence. So of course she's lying. And of course she's going to continue to become her father and we're going to be doomed forever. Right. When in all actuality, client couldn't see, it makes sense why she couldn't, because she's in that other fear, right? She couldn't see that that time spent with her was actually reality for the both of them because it happened. That story that the daughter had told her mom was reality for her at the time. She wanted that to be her reality. Maybe there was a reason why she wanted that to be her reality. So maybe mom, and this is not no disrespect or anything towards mom. Mom did beautifully. It makes sense why she would feel like offended because she's really labeling it all as this is all coming from her father. It's all like got a evil intent, not on her daughter's part, but this is all because of her father. And so she's going to see that everything that daughter does, even the mistakes, as coming from a misguided, ill-intended place, just like I was with my daughter. But she also couldn't see that possibly like this story that she was telling her mom, she really wanted to be true. And she felt a disconnect between the person that she wants to be, the experiences that she wants to have, and her own self. And that maybe she doesn't feel so good about herself. And so telling that story feels like the better, more pleasing option, right? Where daughter was really just trying to please mom, maybe. I'm just assuming. I'm just making assumptions. I'm just giving alternate scenarios. So daughter wants to please her mom. She gives her this story, and then maybe she feels like, oh, okay, maybe I'll be accepted. Not to say that mom is ever doing anything bad or trying to reprimand her daughter for being whoever she is. I'm sure mom has actually been very accepting and loving with her daughter, right? Actually, this is proof to show that someone else's actions, like in this case, her daughter's, has really nothing to do with the person who was receiving those actions or present for those actions. Do you know what I'm saying? The daughter was telling this made up story to mom, what we think is a made up story. We're not even sure, but telling the story to mom in the reality that she might have wanted to live, it might not have had anything to do with just trying to lie to mom. This may actually be her daughter's way of reaching out and trying to connect with her mom and thinks that that's the way that her mom wants to receive her. It could possibly be just a miscommunication between the two of them. And I think we all do this, especially when it comes to parents and children, because children always, even in their alienated state, they really do always want others to receive them well. They want to know that they're pleasing to especially the parents, even if alienated. It's just a fact. It's just the way the kids are, the way that their DNA is. They don't want to feel rejected or know that there's a chance of rejection. And so if they're telling stories most of the time, it's because maybe that's what they want, or maybe there's another self-worth thing going on. But it makes sense. It makes sense that we as parents, many times we will make assumptions that what their story, the lie that they're telling must mean something bad. And then so what do? We turn around and we micromanage them, right? And try to get them to behave in certain ways so that they have the life that you want for them. And this all ends up backfiring, coming from that place of fear and not managing your mind around the thoughts that are causing you fear, cause all these other distortions and end up only pushing them away further in the end. Make sense? Here's another one, and then I'm going to shut up. So let me just say too, I didn't say this, making assumptions and that cognitive distortion, we do it two different ways. We either mind read when we pretend to know or we think that we know exactly how somebody else is going to behave. Oh, they're just going to reject me. They're just going to do what they always do. And they're going to call me names and tell me I'm this and blah, blah, blah. I had another client tell me this morning, the reason I'm not going to drop off the birthday card, or I forget what she was doing this time, but I'm not going is because I don't want to get kicked in the face. Now, that was a little bit catastrophizing because client never actually got kicked in the face. Funny, not funny. There was an incident at the house the last time that she actually saw her son, which was a year and a half ago, but it had nothing to do with anybody kicking anybody in the face or anywhere, really, for that matter. So she had already read his mind, knew in her mind, was convinced that he was going to, quote unquote, kick her in the face, reject her. And so she was already not going to do it, right? She'd already mind read, fortune told, which is also what we do, jumped to all the conclusion, catastrophized, labeled the whole potential visit to go over there as not a good idea. It's not going to happen. It would have sucked anyway. And just basically cut herself off before she even tried. So you see how all of these distortions work against you and cause you to feel separated from your children, but not only feel it, but also sometimes in the case where you still have contact with them, really be separated from your children, even while they're smack in front of you, you know? So when you're fortune telling, it's basically the same thing as mind reading, except for we're predicting events. Usually we will fortune tell sort of like this event that just didn't happen with my client, because we're trying to avoid some discomfort for our own selves, right? I don't want to be quote unquote kicked in the face by my son. I don't want to be rejected. I hear parents like you and I do this all the time. Why even bother? There's so many of these distortions that are intermingle and get intertwined with each other. Why even bother? This is the discounting the positive. It won't work anyway. History has already shown every time I do it, they reject me. And I'm not suggesting that you go keep beating your head up against a wall, keep going in only to take more. But to my point that I've made many times recently is that the only thing that you really have to endure is the story that's going on in your brain. The only thing you ever have to endure, aside from if there's any physical abuse or something happening where somebody is being violent, right? And that's a situation where you can take yourself out of it. You draw a boundary and you get out, or you call the police, or you do whatever. We're, of course, not considering that for this. But all the other things, the only thing that we ever have to endure is our own thinking about whatever's happening. So I explained to this client, now I've got to stop after this, but I explained to this client today who was not going to go see her son as she had planned to drop off a birthday card. I said, I see this as an opportunity for you. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm scared he's going to reject me. I don't know how I would react if he told me to leave again. And I was like, what would you do? She was like, I would just tell him to stop. And I said, and yes, and if this were to happen and he were to reject you, we don't even know if that's going to happen. You could look at this like this is an opportunity for me to show him strength, to show him love, unconditional love, right? And say something like, listen, you may not like what I'm getting ready to say, but it does seem like you're hurting so much. And I just want to let you know, and I will always take every opportunity I see to tell you how much I love you. I always love you, and I always will, no matter what. And then that walk away. And so that not only overcomes your maybe crippling fear of being rejected, right? Like that's the ultimate dun dun dun. I'm going to be rejected, right? Catastrophizing. And instead, you can take that, I'm going to be rejected. Oh my gosh, that's fear, and turn that into this is an opportunity for me to show them just how much I love them. How, like, no matter what, without conditions, I will continue to show love, and I will continue to look for ways to show love, no matter what. You don't have to love me. You don't have to tell me you love me. You don't have to hug me. You can tell me to leave. And so long as you're not hurting me, I'm just going to keep telling you how much I love you. And I will leave now. You know, I will respect your wishes and I will leave. Her son is 19. So it really depends on what place you're in and how old your children are and how long it's been. But anyway, the whole point of all of this is just to say that there's so many times where I think we cut ourselves off so quickly and out of fear because we're like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. They've already shot me down so many times. So what? So what if they've shot you down? This is if you're trying, right? It's okay if they've shot you down, or you can, if you want to be okay with that, you can come to be okay with it. The only thing that a lot of times people really have the trouble addressing with that or overcoming with that is, yeah, of course, there's the core pain, right? But then there's this ego, like they can't shoot me down. They can't be disrespectful. But again, nobody can disrespect you if you don't feel disrespected. If you don't have a story in your head that says I'm being disrespected, if you're wanting to teach your kid how to not be an asshole, right? That's one thing. But if you're trying to build up resilience for yourselves and model to them what unconditional love looks like, then that's when we let go of being offended by all the things, right? Because they're just everything that they're saying and doing, and their hurtful ways, what you perceive as hurtful is really their hurt coming out. And I know that you know that, just as you know probably everything that I say, but like knowing it and then actually implementing it, practicing it in your everyday life, noticing where it's coming up for you in your everyday life is really where the magic begins to happen, you know? So just to give you a quick overview, it was being too positive and not allowing for them to have disappointments and to feel anger or sadness or whatever for their everyday events, whatever's going on with them. And just being able to sit with them, allowing for them to be whoever they are, show up as whoever they are. Emotional reasoning, you're basing all of reality on your own internal emotions, right? It must be, I feel, therefore it must be blah, blah, blah. With that one, it's a good idea to poke some holes in your stories. How could it be the opposite of that? Like, let's say I feel anxious today. That means something bad's going to happen. How might it be that if I feel anxious today, keeping that emotion there, that the best thing's going to happen? Because in all reality, anxiety and excitement actually are the same emotion. Like they feel the same inside your body. So it could actually be that I just happened to pick that one, but it was a good one. So how could the opposite be true for that? Should statements, shouldn't statements. Again, question what might be if a different person were in the situation, or if you were to take huge step over to the left or to the right and how it looks. Okay. Micromanaging, asking yourself, how important is this? What is the effect that I want to have? What is the result that I want to have? If it's coming from a fear, just like give yourself a little pause there. Ask yourself instead, how can I support them? How can I be with them during whatever it is that you say that they need to do? Like, how can I not manipulate them? That's different. How can I meet them where they're at? Labeling. I mean, we just basically talked through all that labeling and making assumptions, catastrophizing. Loosen your grip on your tendency to label because when you do it, it's actually your subconscious's way of trying to calm you down and make sense of things. But maybe things don't need to be made sense of. And in fact, I like to say always more will be revealed. More information is going to come in. I don't need to know exactly what this means right now. Maybe it just is. It's not black or white. It's not splitting. It's not putting it into one box and shutting myself off from all the other possibilities. Because when you label, you end up cutting off all of your curiosity and ability to problem solve. You've labeled it, put it in a box, closed it up, all done. So just considering how it might be okay without the label on it. And then catastrophizing, consider how the opposite might be true or how different realities. Like I like to flip things pretty radically. Like if I say a statement, I want to try to figure out how either I'm being the way that I'm assuming or that like the opposite is true in a really radical and fun sort of way. They're being that way. My kid is being that way because my ex is trying to control them. Right. And I could be like, well, I'm being that way because I'm trying to control them. That's true. In that situation, it probably is. You know, they're being that way because they're trying to control me. Maybe you could all the different ways flip it on its head and see how it might be true for you or whatever. Okay, so that's it. Now, as far as that was much longer than I thought it was going to be, of course. As far as the new thingy, what we're going to do moving forward. If you have stayed this long, then it must mean that you actually are interested. I have a poll for you to fill out. I'm actually going to do it on the Spotify. Like if you're on the episode, if you're watching on Spotify or listening through Spotify, there is a poll on the episode. I have a course that I've designed, and it's basically, I haven't fully named it yet, but it's basically a survival guide for alienated parents, right? And so I was going to make it into smaller little courses, and I decided, nope, I'm going to do the full course. It's going to be dripped over a certain period of time. The material's been written. I've been putting bells and whistles on it, but I want to make sure before I put it out there in whatever format, I want to make sure that there is enough interest in one of the two ways. The choices are to offer this course in small group coaching cohorts to go through, and we will do like it's the course in like a 8-week program, probably. Like, so we would have the course, we would meet once a week for a live class, and then we would meet a second time during the week for a coaching call, group coaching call. And then also there would be a community for you guys to interact with and build some camaraderie with you parents together. And that, of course, it's a bit more of a hands-on, I'm with you, walking you through it, giving you a lot of direction. You're getting direct coaching, basically like one-on-one coaching in a group atmosphere. You don't have to be coached in a group atmosphere if you don't want, just the option is there. And then there's, also the live class. There's more access. There's more help, right? Assistance and accountability, if you will. Everybody with you is doing the course together, and it's more of a community atmosphere. The second option would be to make this course, the same course, be self-study. All of the material is all, like the videos would all be recorded. So it's just self-study. You go at your own pace. And so obviously this one is not going to have as much, the accountability is not going to be there, and the camaraderie, the community feature of it will not be as much. However, with that one, I'm thinking about offering, so you get the course with either of them, right? Or the group coaching, however we do it. With either of them, there's a weekly group coaching call that you have from now until however long the program is up and running and flying, right? So forever, you have group coaching once a week, okay? With either program. One of them obviously is going to be less expensive than the other one. But I would encourage you too. I just want to say, because to me, it makes no difference. I really love the interacting with y'all. So I mean, of course, I would rather have the cohorts, but otherwise it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, the way that I have it. I would encourage you to, I do have payment plans. So if money is the problem, like the only reason that you wouldn't do the group coaching one or do either of them at all, then I would encourage you to, this is like something that it will change your life. I need to get them up there on a web page or something too. I have so many testimonials from other parents that have gone through my one-on-one coaching, and also the membership to parents that have said over and over how this work has been so significant and instrumental in changing the way that they move about their lives and how they interact with their kiddos. And I have other parents that can't take credit for any of it because it's the parents that are doing the work. But because of this work, they have successfully reunited with their kids. So I think it's just a tool, this work, if you want it, and money is the thing that's standing in your way. Where there's a will, there's a way, number one. But I always I way go undershoot and always try to make the costs low so that y'all can access this. I never want you guys to feel, and that's why I provide this free resource for you guys, for as far as the weekly podcast free. So I'll always do that. So I want to make sure that everybody has resources, but if it's something that that you really want, I would encourage you I will help you to figure it out. I also know too that things that are given to people, it's just, there's all the data out there to show that the people that are given the things perform lower than the ones that are paying for it. So I want to make sure that I am doing you a solid, doing all of the whole community too. I want to make sure that the solution that I come up with is one where it's working in the best possible way for your ultimate best. Does that make sense? So I don't want to sell you short when I know that all of you too you can figure it out. But I do offer payment plans, and there's uh Klarna and all the other things on there too. But yeah, so back to what I was saying is that if you do want it, if you have a preference in how it's delivered to you, let me know on the Spotify poll that is for this episode. And also, I'm going to put in the show notes a web page that you can go to and click one of the two. And then also, it'll just ask for your email. Trust me, the people that are on my email list know that it is a rare occasion that I send an email out these days. So don't worry, I won't be spamming you. But if you want more information on it, then you fill out, and that way I can just let you know when it's launching. Okay. Because I do want to get that out. I want to start it in the next 8 weeks. Really, I really want to start it sooner, but I think that's more realistic to get everybody in. So let me know. Do you want a group coaching? That was a long way to say, do you want group coaching or do you want self-study? More access, less access. Okay. All right, you guys. Bye.